If someone had told me that my son's wedding day would be the day my entire life unraveled, I would have laughed. We'd spent months planning every tiny detail, the flowers, the food, the music. It was supposed to be perfect. A celebration of love, family, and everything Franklin and I had built over 25 years together. But sometimes, the worst moments of your life don't start with screaming or chaos. They start with silence, with a strange, heavy stillness that settles in your chest before you even know why. That morning, as I stood in my kitchen, watching the sun rise over the backyard where my son would say his vows, I had no idea I was only hours away from discovering the kind of betrayal that changes everything you believe about love, marriage, and family. I just remember thinking, something feels wrong today. And I was right. I woke up before the sun that morning, long before the alarm. The house was still dark, quiet, and heavy, with that kind of silence that only exists before something big is about to happen. My son Elijah was getting married in just a few hours. And for most mothers, that would have been the happiest day of their lives. I told myself it would be for me too. I made coffee, the way I always did, 2 sugars. No cream, and sat down at my desk in the little home office I'd built when I started my CPA firm. It wasn't fancy, but it had kept us afloat all these years. Paying for Elijah's college, keeping the mortgage steady, covering the little extras Franklin's paycheck never quite stretched to. The glow of the computer screen blurred before my eyes as I stared at spreadsheets I couldn't focus on. My thoughts weren't on the numbers, they were drifting to the backyard, to the white chairs lined up in perfect rows, to the arch that Franklin built with his own hands, and that I'd spent months covering with pink climbing roses. Every bulb on those string lights had been tested 3 times by me personally. I'd wanted everything to be perfect. Our son deserved nothing less. But even as I sat there in the dim light, with the faint smell of coffee and roses filling the house, something in my chest felt wrong. It wasn't the usual pre-wedding nerves. It was heavier, sharper, like a warning that my body knew before my mind could catch up. For months, Franklin had been different. He used to be the kind of man who filled a room with laughter. The kind who'd come up behind me while I cooked and wrap his arms around my waist just to make me laugh. Lately, that man had disappeared. He stopped looking at me when I spoke. His phone was always face down. When I walked into a room, he'd stop talking. His smile would fade. I asked him once if something was wrong. He just smiled, that same smooth, practiced smile that had once made me fall for him, and said, "Just work, honey. Big promotion coming up." And like a fool, or maybe like any wife who's built her entire world around her family, I believed him. Because what else could I do? You don't just throw away 25 years of marriage over a feeling you can't even name. Around 6:30, I heard footsteps. Elijah, my only son, still in his pajamas, hair messy, eyes tired. He looked so much like Franklin when he was young that it almost hurt to look at him. He handed me a mug of coffee, then sat on the edge of my desk like he used to when he was little. "Mom, you've been up for hours," he said. "The wedding isn't until 4. "I know," I smiled. "Just making sure everything's perfect for my boy." He hesitated, staring into his cup. "Dad left early," he said finally, his tone strange. I frowned. "Left early? For what?" He said he had to pick up a gift for Madison's parents. That didn't sound right. Franklin hated shopping. But before I could ask more, Elijah took a deep breath. The kind that comes right before you say something you've been holding in too long. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think Madison really loves me?" I swear my heart stopped. For a moment, I just looked at him, this grown man I'd raised. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike and held through every scraped knee and heartbreak in. I saw fear in his eyes. Of course she does, honey, I said softly. It's just nerves. Everyone gets cold feet before the wedding. He shook his head. No, it's more than that. Sometimes when she looks at me, it's like she's looking right through me. Like I'm just part of some checklist she's trying to complete. And lately, he hesitated, his jaw tightening. She's been spending a lot of time with Dad. I forced a small laugh, the kind mothers use to smooth away worry. Your dad's been helping her with some financial advice, hasn't he? Yeah, he said, not meeting my eyes. That's what she says. But it feels off. The way they talk, the way they laugh. I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it. He wasn't overthinking it. Deep down, I knew he wasn't. I'd seen the same things. The way Franklin's eyes followed Madison when she entered a room. The way he always seemed to know what she liked, her coffee order, her perfume. The color she said made her feel confident. But I'd brushed it off. Because the alternative was unthinkable. So I did what mothers do best. I smiled, squeezed his hand, and told him everything would be okay. Wedding jitters, I said. That's all this is. But when he left the room, the smile slipped from my face, and the house felt colder than it had before. Outside, the sun was rising, turning the sky the same pale pink as the roses in the garden. It should have been the start of the happiest day of my life, the day I watched my son begin his own family. But as I looked out the window, watching the light spill across the yard Franklin and I had built together, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break. And I was right. That was the morning my world began to fall apart slowly, quietly, like a crack spreading through glass, waiting for the right moment to shatter everything I thought I knew about love, marriage, and the people I trusted most. By 10 o'clock that morning, the house was spotless, too spotless. I had spent the last 2 hours wiping already clean counters, rearranging flowers that didn't need rearranging, and pretending to check the catering schedule just so I wouldn't go insane. Franklin and Elijah had both left. My husband had mentioned something about helping Madison with last-minute seating arrangements. Elijah had gone to pick up his tuxedo. That left me alone in the house, just me. The faint hum of the refrigerator, and a gnawing ache in my chest that refused to quiet down. At exactly 10, I saw her car pull up, Madison's white BMW, polished to perfection, gliding into the driveway like it belonged there. She stepped out in fitted jeans and a soft cream blouse, her hair pulled back loosely, her phone in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. She looked like the picture of calm confidence. A woman who had everything figured out, but she wasn't supposed to be here alone with my husband. I moved to the kitchen window, staying just out of sight. Franklin opened the door for her, smiling in that familiar, charming way that used to make me feel safe. He touched her back lightly as she entered, too lightly, too comfortably, and that one gesture made every hair on my arms stand up. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I'd walk in any second and see them talking about flower arrangements or guest lists. But something inside me, that quiet, feminine instinct that never lies, whispered, "Don't look away." So I didn't. I slipped out the back door and circled around the house, crouching behind the hydrangea bushes that lined our living room windows. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. I felt ridiculous, like some jealous middle-aged woman spying on her husband. But I had to know. I had to say. Through the glass, I saw Franklin and Madison standing by the fireplace, the same one where we'd hung Elijah's Christmas stockings every year since he was born. Franklin poured her a drink. They talked, and she laughed, a soft, flirty laugh that didn't sound like nerves. He leaned closer, his hand brushing the small of her back, and she didn't move away. For a moment, everything inside me froze. I told myself it was innocent, that I was misreading it, that no man, no father, would ever do that to his own son. But then I saw the look on Franklin's face, that soft, adoring look that used to be reserved for me. It was the kind of look that leaves no room for doubt. I felt something inside me break, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly. Like a bone splintering under too much pressure. I was about to stand up, to march inside, and demand an explanation. When I saw movement upstairs. A shadow in the reflection. Elijah. He was standing at the top of the stairs, watching them too. His face pale, his body stiff, his hand gripping the railing so tight his knuckles were white. My heart twisted in my chest. This wasn't just my pain anymore. It was his. Before I could think, I felt a hand grab my arm. I gasped and turned. It was Elijah. He had slipped out of the house somehow, his eyes burning, his jaw tight with a fury that didn't belong on his young face. "Mom," he whispered, his voice shaking, "don't." I couldn't even find words. My throat was too tight, my lungs too full of fire and grief. "Elijah, there—" "I know," he said flatly. "I've known for weeks." My knees almost gave out. "What?" He nodded, his expression calm but hollow. Like someone who'd cried every tear he had and was now running only on adrenaline. "I needed proof," he said. "And now I have it." He pulled out his phone and handed it to me. My hands shook as I scrolled through the photos. Franklin and Madison together at restaurants, in hotel lobbies, even one of them kissing in the parking lot of the St. Regis downtown. The timestamps dated weeks back. It wasn't just a fling. It was an affair. A full-blown, calculated, cruel affair. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. The man I had loved for 25 years had betrayed me and our son. In the most unforgivable way imaginable. I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves, Elijah said quietly, watching me with those same dark eyes he'd inherited from his father. But I'm done watching now. I'm going to destroy them. His words should have scared me. But in that moment, they didn't, because as I stood there behind the flowers I'd planted with love, staring through the window, at my husband and the young woman, who was supposed to become my daughter, something in me changed. The part of me that still wanted to believe in forgiveness, in decency, in family. She died right there, in the dirt behind that window. And in her place, someone else was born. Someone colder, smarter, stronger. Because that day wasn't going to end with a wedding. It was going to end with justice. That night, the house felt different. Quieter, heavier, as if the walls themselves knew what had happened. Franklin came home around dinner time, humming softly like he didn't have a care in the world. He kissed my cheek, poured himself a drink, and asked about the caterer, as if he hadn't just destroyed our family hours earlier. I stood there, stirring the pot on the stove, watching him talk, his movements, his voice, his smile. I'd known this man for 25 years. Shared a bed with him, built a life around him. And suddenly, he was a stranger. A beautifully disguised stranger who knew exactly how to make a woman believe she was safe. I nodded and smiled in all the right places, my face calm while my insides screamed. Every word that left his mouth sounded rehearsed, mechanical, hollow. I realized then that I'd been living with a liar for a very long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. When he finally went to bed, I sat in the dark of my home office, waiting. Around midnight, Elijah slipped in and closed the door quietly behind him. His eyes were tired, red-rimmed, but steady. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. He placed a folder on my desk and opened it. Inside were printed photos, reports, receipts, evidence that no mother should ever have to look at. "She's been seeing him for months," Elijah said quietly. "Hotels, dinners, even weekend trips when he told you he was out of town for work." My stomach turned. "How did you—" "I hired someone," he interrupted, "a private investigator." I looked up at him, shocked. "You what?" "Elijah, where did you even—" "She's good," he said, ignoring my protest. "Her name's Aisha." I froze. "Aisha? My sister?" He nodded, looking guilty but firm. I didn't know who else to trust. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process it. My sister, the retired cop, the one who had always been sharp enough to see through people. The one who never really liked Franklin, though she was too polite to say it. A minute later, I picked up my phone and called her. She answered on the second ring. "Simone," she said, "it's past midnight. What's going on?" My voice broke before I could answer. And then, everything came pouring out. The photos, the lies. The way Elijah and I had watched it all unfold like some kind of twisted movie. I told her about the kiss, the betrayal, the years of subtle distance that now made horrible sense. She didn't interrupt once. When I finally ran out of words, there was a long silence on the line. "I'm not surprised," she said softly. "I've seen the way he looks at that girl. I was hoping I was wrong." That was the first time I realized how long this deception had been hiding in plain sight. Over the next few days, Aisha worked fast. She had access to things I couldn't even imagine: financial records, old files, paper trails Franklin thought he'd buried. What she found made my stomach twist in a way betrayal alone never could. It wasn't just Madison. It was another woman. A name I didn't recognize: Nicole Jenkins. Aisha explained everything over the phone, her voice low and careful, like she was trying to soften the blow that couldn't be softened. Franklin had been making monthly payments to this woman for 15 years, regular, discreet, always in cash or small bank transfers. At first, I thought it was another affair. But then she said the words that took my breath away. "She has a daughter, Simone. 15 years old." The world went silent. Aisha took a deep breath. "Her name is Zoe, and I ran the records. I'm almost certain Franklin is her father." I remember clutching the phone so tight my knuckles went white. "Aisha, you can't just say that." "I'm not guessing," she said gently. "I'm telling you what the evidence says." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to Franklin, listening to his soft snoring, that familiar sound that used to comfort me, and all I could think was, "Who are you?" Every late night at the office, every unexplained business trip, every golf weekend suddenly made sense. He hadn't just betrayed me now, he'd been living a double life for over a decade. By morning, Aisha had confirmation. The DNA test came back, 99.999% probability of paternity. 15 years. 15 years of lies. 15 years of another woman, another child. Another world built on my money, my trust, my silence. I sat in my car with that report in my hands, feeling something inside me die completely. I didn't cry. Not even once. I'd already done enough crying for a lifetime. What I felt was something colder, sharper, and far more dangerous than grief. Resolve. I looked out the window at the quiet street where I'd parked, at the sun rising over the houses, at people going about their lives, completely unaware that mine had just ended, and all I could think was how strange it felt to lose everything, and yet feel more certain than ever about what I needed to do next. Franklin wasn't just going to lose his wife. He was going to lose everything he'd built on my back, every secret, every dollar, every lie. Because if he'd spent 15 years hiding the truth, I was going to spend the rest of my life making sure the world saw it. The morning of the wedding felt unreal, like I was trapped in someone else's dream. The house was buzzing, florists rushing in and out, photographers unpacking lenses, laughter echoing down the hallway. Everyone was talking about love, about the perfect day, while I stood there in the middle of it all, holding a truth that could burn this whole place to the ground. Franklin moved around me like nothing had happened, smiling that charming, practiced smile of his. He looked so proud, so composed, giving orders, greeting guests, sipping champagne before noon, like a man who had earned the right to celebrate. But every time I looked at him, I didn't see a husband anymore. I saw a stranger wearing the face of the man I used to love. A liar, A thief. A man who'd stolen 25 years of my life and turned them into a lie. I could never escape. Elijah, on the other hand, was calm, disturbingly calm. He wasn't the boy I raised anymore. He was quiet, focused, his eyes sharp and unblinking. He had a plan. And I had promised him I wouldn't interfere. Around noon, Aisha met me behind the catering tent. She was dressed like a guest, her hair done. A camera bag slung casually over her shoulder. To everyone else, she was just my sister. But I knew what she was carrying: copies of every photo, every financial record, every ugly truth Franklin thought he'd buried. "It's all ready," she whispered. "The slideshow, the files, the videos. Once Elijah gives the signal, it'll go live." My stomach twisted. "You're sure about this?" She looked at me for a long moment. "Simone, you already lost your marriage. Don't let him keep your dignity too." She was right. When the ceremony began, I took my seat in the front row, surrounded by family and friends who still believed in the fairy tale. The sun filtered through the rose arch I had built, the same one that had once symbolized everything pure and hopeful about our family. Franklin stood beside Elijah, grinning for the cameras. Madison appeared moments later, radiant in white. Her arm looped through her father's. If anyone had looked at me closely, they would have seen my hands shaking. But my face, perfectly still. As the officiant began to speak, time seemed to slow. The words about love and loyalty, about trust and unity, felt like acid in my throat. I looked at Madison, beautiful, confident, deceiving, and wondered how she could stand there, surrounded by flowers and vows, when she knew what she'd done. Then I saw Elijah move, subtle, controlled. He handed something to the coordinator, a small USB drive. My heart started to pound. Seconds later, the string quartet faded out, and the sound system crackled. The screen behind the altar, meant to play a slideshow of childhood photos, flickered to life. At first, it was exactly what everyone expected: baby Elijah in the bathtub. Family vacations, birthdays. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Franklin smiled proudly, resting a hand on my shoulder. And then, the next photo appeared. Franklin, Madison, in a hotel lobby. Laughter stopped. The next photo, them again, at dinner, her hand on his arm. Then another. And another. And another. Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire. Someone dropped a glass. I heard whispers, then shouts. Franklin's face turned gray. Madison froze, her bouquet slipping from her hands. The final image wasn't a photo. It was a document. DNA results, probability of paternity to 99.999%. Zoe Jenkins. Age, 15. The crowd erupted. Madison's parents stood up in shock. Franklin lunged toward the coordinator, yelling to cut the power, but it was too late. Elijah stepped forward, his voice steady through the chaos. "I just wanted everyone here to know the kind of people we're celebrating today," he said. "The man who's been lying to his wife for 15 years, and the woman who's been sleeping with him behind my back." Silence fell thick, heavy, unforgiving. I watched Franklin's mouth open, but no sound came out. For once in his life, he had no words. I should have felt victorious, but what I felt was empty, not relief, not joy, just quiet. The kind that comes after a storm has taken everything with it. Franklin tried to speak to me as people started to leave, his voice trembling. "Simone, please. Let me explain." I looked at him, really looked at him one last time. "No, Franklin," I said softly. "You've been explaining for years. I just wasn't listening." He reached out, but I stepped back. Behind him, Madison was sobbing in her ruined dress, her perfect life collapsing before it even began. Elijah came to stand beside me, his jaw set, eyes cold. "Let's go home, Mom." We walked away together, past the flowers, the broken glasses, the stairs, past everything that used to mean love, now drenched in betrayal. That night, when the house was finally quiet again, I sat in my office, the same place where the morning had begun, and stared at the blank computer screen. 25 years. A husband, a son, a lie. I opened a new file and began typing. Not an email. Not a message. Just a story, my story. Because sometimes the only way to survive the fire is to tell the world how you burned.